Now, does this actually qualify as a pressing issues episode? I was intending for it to be more of a comparison, but screw it, roll titles. DTM. Deutsche Tourenwagen Masters. But we'll just stick to DTM, Germany's domestic touring car series. It used to be called Deutsche Tourenwagen Meisterschaft before it died after the 1996 season, before being revived as Tourenwagen Masters as opposed to Meisterschaft, but aren't Meister and Master just the same word but in two different languages? I don't know, I speak Spanish as my second language. But some would argue that at the end of the 2020 season, the series died again. Mercedes and Audi left, leaving just BMW. Now it's just a GT3 series, and it did so at the last minute, and that was just a bid to get more manufacturers in. Now from what I saw, DTM is a series that was pretty good. The issue is, I was watching it back in 2003, 2004 or so when DTM got a bit of exposure thanks to the TOCA race driver games on the PlayStation 2. And when they brought in this new Class 1 thing in 2014, I just had no interest in it whatsoever. Until that is, yesterday. If you tuned into Traction.gg's channel last night, you may have seen that BMW and rFactor 2 collaborated to bring the BMW M4 Class 1 to the simulation. Now the car is quite literally what BMW would have run in DTM this year. It had been designed, it had been modelled, but due to the death of the class, it couldn't run in anger. So it needed somewhere to run. So the whole thing with revealing the car last night on Traction.gg's YouTube channel and the rFactor 2 Twitch channel, it got me interested in the class of car, purely on the basis that it was an absolute animal to drive in rFactor 2, particularly in low first gear. No traction control, no ABS, just a lot of power. And it turns out that DTM cars were a lot faster than they appeared. The fastest lap at the Nürburgring set by Nico Müller was faster than both GTE and GT3. Nearly 10 seconds faster than GT3 in fact. The car also tops out at about 185 miles an hour, or 300 kilometers for you metrics, and produced so much downforce that the series had to allow DRS and push to pass to promote overtaking. When your touring car series needs DRS, you've gone too far. It was like a much faster Super Touring. And I should also add now that Class 1 is pretty much what they use in Super GT, but while DTM tyres fall off, the Super GT cars were Hosen Arewa Nanedeshu, which is Japanese for conservation. What's that? Aerodynamics produces an arms race. Arms races get expensive. When things get too expensive, people pull out. With so much downforce and the manufacturers all going to other series, so Mercedes to Formula E, Audi going back to top class endurance, and then BMW being left on their own, the only option for the series was to switch to GT3. Now a DTM car costs about €1.5 million to build, let alone run, and a GT3 costs about half that to buy. Which is great, costs come down, and DTM had actually done some bits and pieces to reduce costs, one of which being to sort out the crazy aerodynamics they were developing on cars that are about as wide as a Formula 1 car, but that then puts the name of the series in doubt. Deutsche Tourenwagen Masters. German touring cars. The series is based in Germany, but well, that's about it. Class 1 was a hot-rodded GTE car. Basically, if GTE or GTLM had no rules. It's a huge departure from the... Oh, I did that wrong, didn't I? It's a huge departure from the good old days of the turbocharged monsters of the late 80s to the Alpha 155 of the mid-90s, which ran in Germany and Britain, and then the ITC cars of the early 2000s that you saw in things like TOCA Race Driver. You know, stuff that sort of looked like the thing that your dad would have driven. The early 2000s stuff was a lot like what a modern V8 supercar is, but with a little bit more downforce though. The only thing that is still a touring car, and I know that it's probably a little bit different in Germany because of the touring cars I'm used to here in the UK, the only thing that's still a touring car is the name. And with the GT World Series, does Germany need a domestic GT3 competition? I'll rephrase. Does Germany need another GT3 competition? Yes, you've got GT World Challenge and you've got IMSA already providing more than enough, but Germany also has a domestic GT3 series, so where's the logic in setting up another? And you have to, in a way, think of the audiences. The audience probably doesn't want another GT3 series. We're all GT3'd out at this point, and DTM has one extra car on the grid compared to last season if the results that I've been looking at are anything to go by. So there's not a lot to get excited about for someone who's brand new to the series. And I'm sure there's going to be more than a handful of people not wanting to be able to carry on watching it and get excited about it who are already watching. And yeah, there was the crossover between Super GT in Japan and DTM here in Europe, and Super GT teams were allowed to modify their cars for racing in Germany and vice versa. But while the German teams went to the Dream Race in Fuji to run against the Japanese cars, not many of the Japanese teams and manufacturers modified their cars to come here. Nissan, Honda, Lexus, whoever, they're just not interested. And from what I've read, it looks like it's because of the way that DTM manages the manufacturer involvement. So what does DTM have to do to get back some of that magic? Well, a couple of weeks ago I compared the modern BTCC NGTC cars, so next generation touring car class, to the fabled Super Touring class that ran between 1992 and 2000, which, like DTM in 1996, died due to escalating costs and resulted in the BTCC being a shadow of its former self for about 10 years following. Now in that video I talked about how the NGTCs had more power, but they've got less downforce than Super Tourers. As a result, Super Tourers, despite having less power, are about 3 seconds a lap faster, making up all the time in corners. DTM could still have super powerful machines, but still have the T in DTM to still mean something. So my idea is to combine the best bits of NGTC, such as the cost-effective nature of the cars and engines, and the grip from Super Touring. But instead of the cars being front-wheel drive, the power goes exclusively to the rear instead. So you've got quick, powerful cars. I mean, you tune the cars a bit more to get, say, 400 horsepower or so, but they're still close to what you or I would be able to buy from any showroom in whatever country we live in. Having a bunch of cars mainly developed as front-wheel drive and then making them rear-wheel drive would probably increase the cost a bit, but you still have less of a reliance on manufacturers being the driving force of a series, and you allow privateers to join in. More expensive than the BTCC, but still cheaper than GT3, but only by a bit, but still, it provides an alternative. And whatever DTM does, it has to do something. And while I often talk about how the glory years of the 80s and 90s aren't coming back, it actually looks like DTM will have to go back to the 90s or the 80s to make the cars be tuned road cars and, you know what I mean, save the series from an entry perspective and a viewer's perspective. And you look at NASCAR, they're pretty much in the same boat. They're having to work out what the hell to do, and that series is having a mare at the minute. V8 supercars as well, as much as I love that series, they're going to be in trouble soon. They've lost Holden, the series staple, Holden. And they're working on the Gen 3 cars at the minute. From what I've read, those things are getting introduced mid-season. Yeah, well done, Straya. So what do you think? What is going to happen to DTM? Do you think the GT3 approach will be a stopgap until a new class of car comes in, or is the series dead on its feet? Do you have any other ideas to fix it, or should it just go or merge with something else? Leave any thoughts, suggestions and comments in the comment section and get a discussion going. And it's after all what this is for. It's basically a forum. I present ideas and you fight amongst yourselves in the comments. So if you thought I've made some good points, give the video a thumb pointing upwards in a vertical fashion. And for more stuff like this, hit subscribe with the bell on so you get all the latest. Big thanks as always go out to the patrons of Patreon for their continued support, and if you wish to join them in supporting me at a more personal level or join in the Discord chat, then all relevant links are in the description box for you. And also a big thanks to the guys at Raceroom for unlocking all of the content in their simulation, so that's where all the B-roll of the DTM 2020 cars, well actually all the DTM cars that are in this video, have come from. So until next time, I've been Aidan Ward, have a great day wherever you are, and I'll see you all again soon for another video. So until then, goodbye.